Winter can be a challenging time for a lot of women who don't feel their most stylish selves when forced to dress with bulkier layers. They feel as though their figure disappears, but the cold season can actually be a very rich playground for self-expression, and so I'm going to share with you my 7 tips on how to feel more stylish in the wintertime. Step 1 is a shift in your mindset. Many of us who came of age or who were young adults at the turn of the century were basically exposed to a lot of fashion that has stretch fabric in it. You know, it was all about the skinny jeans, things being very tight. And even with older generations, there can also be this idea that a stylish outfit has to have a cinched waist. And while you can definitely find some winter coats that do have a little more of a tapered waist, I don't think the goal of style has to be showing off your silhouette. And volume is a very great tool for creating visual interest and for self-expression. Your goal does not have to be to reduce your size to take up as less space as you can visually. Silhouettes that are larger in size can signal confidence. They show that you're not afraid to be present. Volume is an important design tool, and it's something that's very modern also, to play with things being more oversized. So don't be afraid to embrace volume. Just ensure that you're doing it in a way that feels interesting and comfortable to you. Okay, the goal of style does not have to be showing off your body. Okay, there are so many more things that you can express visually. It's about storytelling, it's about colors, shapes, textures. When you make this mind shift, you no longer see that volume as an obstacle, but as an opportunity. And while we're on the subject of volume, step 2 is about the silhouette. So it is very easy to get in the habit of buying pieces without really taking into consideration the shape that you're creating. And I don't just mean individual garments, but as a whole. So what I mean here by silhouette is, imagine if we saw your shadow projected on a wall. We don't have the textures, the details, the ornaments. All we have is the outline. That is the silhouette of your garment. So you can think in terms of whether you want your silhouette to be an hourglass, a column, a barrel shape. Do you want stronger shoulders? Do you want more rounded shoulders? When you know what silhouette you want, you can create an outfit that is coherent. And this is where I'm going to swim against the tide, because a lot of content around style is pushing the idea of mixing and matching and juxtaposing opposites, whether that is putting something oversized with something tight, putting something more casual with something more formal. And these are things that you can absolutely do, but it requires a little more skill, because just putting something that is tailored and formal with something unstructured, bohemian, isn't necessarily going to work. These things can look very disjointed. A more foundational skill that we can build first is how to create outfits that feel coherent. And this means pairing garments that have shapes that actually work in continuity or that mirror each other. Historically, this is what was done, right? If you think of early 2010s, a lot of the styles we see, everything is very narrow, right? Everything is fitting to the body, and that's because it is so much easier to create a silhouette when everything is in line, whereas if you do a more boxy shape on top, but with a skinny pants, that can sometimes look a little off depending on the style. It's not necessarily wrong, but it takes a little more skill. So here you see me wearing a coat, and this coat is very rectangular. It's very structured. It's a stiffer fabric. You know, it's a coat made of wool. So what I'm seeing here is that the pants are not really echoing or mirroring the style of the coat, and this for me is creating a style that's a little disjointed. And there is another issue with this look, but I'll come back to that later. This is an image I used in my last video. I don't like how these pants are bending and the shape is a bit undefined. I would have liked to see bootcut trousers perhaps that have a very precise, well-defined rectangular shape. Here I have a synthetic faux fur coat, and this pairs so much more nicely with the pants because the pants have that kind of rounded shape, and so does the coat, right? Because of this sort of bulky shape, it has these blunt, rounded angles that mirror the rounded shape of the pants and even of the shoes. From a storytelling perspective, this also works because this is a more whimsical, a more fun look. So the pieces do also feel like they are cohesive in terms of the story they're trying to tell, whereas the coat from before feels a little more classic and elegant. Even though this is quite a statement, at the end of the day, it is pretty laid back. It is pretty a fun, chill kind of look. So in summary, try to create a silhouette that is coherent. If you're going to go with more tailored, more structured pieces, perhaps have that be the theme all along. If you're going with some things that have a little more ease, then maybe pick pieces that do actually fit within that story. So now let's actually look at the pieces, okay? So step 3 is the coat. The coat is the thing that takes up the most space visually, at least when you're outside, and it is also maybe the thing that keeps a lot of people from feeling stylish because they feel covered up. However, a beautiful winter coat is such an opportunity to make a splash visually. So I think that this is one area where it's worth spending a little more, whereas you don't want to be buying a designer t-shirt. I don't see the point of that. A coat that is good quality is definitely worth it, though of course you always have the option to go into something that's in the secondhand market if that is too pricey for you. So I would not ever recommend getting a coat that is supposed to mimic the look, the appearance of a wool coat, but it's actually made of polyester or synthetics. I would also not settle for a blend unless it's a really, really small percentage of synthetics in proportion to wool. Let's say at least 90% wool. And under wool, we can also consider other types of animal fibers, such as alpaca, mohair, cashmere. Okay, it doesn't have to be sheep's wool. It can be any type of animal fiber. These tend to be very insulating, whereas polyester, nylon, acrylic are not insulating. They're also not breathable, which wool is. Wool is breathable. Insulation means that that garment creates little tiny pockets of air, and that is what's going to keep you warm. Whereas breathability has to do with your sweat evaporating. So when you're wearing synthetics, they're not breathable, and you're in the cold weather when you're outside, yes, but you're also going in and out of spaces that have heating, so you're going to be sweating under those layers. So it would be so much better to have clothes that are made from these natural fibers that are breathable. They're also moisture wicking. And a coat made of wool, it tends to look much more elegant. It looks very classic, but it's also very versatile. You can dress it down, you can dress it up, you can incorporate it into a wardrobe very easily, regardless of what your aesthetic preferences are. Whereas when you put on a puffer coat, those just tend to feel very sporty, and so it can be a little hard to feel stimulated if you're not someone who by default likes a more sporty, more casual look. Okay, so if you're someone who likes a more classic, elegant look, but you feel like you have to wear a puffer coat because that is the warmest option, it might send you down a downward spiral where, well, because this is sporty, I should put on sneakers, and before you know it, your entire look just feels a little drab to you because that's not who you are. I see a lot of women around Paris, yes, the capital of fashion, we're told, and Parisian women never wear this, they never wear that. It's nonsense. You see a sea of women in puffer jackets and parka jackets and things of the sort, and I can tell it's not coming from a place of self-expression. It's usually more just people being pragmatic. However, for the kind of weather we have here, a wool coat and a wool sweater underneath is usually more than enough. And I wonder if the proliferation of synthetic substitutes have led people to believe that these types of coats are not warm. They are. If it's real wool, it should be warm. Of course, how warm a coat is also depends on other factors such as the thickness of the material. Now, if you live in very extreme cold, very, very extreme cold, not like here in Paris. Let's think you live in a Scandinavian country or in Canada, one of these places, then by all means, if you want to wear the down jacket, wear the down jacket. However, in such situations, there are people who prefer sheepskin or lambskin, so if this is you, what do you prefer? What do you think is the warmest? And remember that you can always opt to hunt for that special puffer jacket, parka, or down jacket that looks different, that isn't just another pragmatic navy or black coat that makes you disappear in a crowd of people. You can always find something that has a special color and shape, and that will stimulate you to put a little more effort into what you're wearing. So now let's go on to the pants. And again, I've talked about the silhouette. So with the pants, we want a clear, intentional shape. We want to avoid those pants that have this very unclear, undefined silhouette. Sometimes this comes down to just hemming the pants. I think a lot of people don't take the time to hem the pants, and so they kind of collapse and bunch up. So we don't want that, and we want the pants ideally to make sense given the kind of outerwear we're opting for. And if you're wearing a jacket or a blazer underneath, you also want to think of coherence in that sense. The other factor is also how the pants look in relationship to the shoes. This is a very important relationship, not just in winter, but in general. You want the shape of the pants to complement the shape of the footwear, okay? So for instance, you pair bootleg pants with boots. This is a classical pairing. There's a reason why it works. But so think of chunky shoes, like chunky trainers. What you could do is either go with pants that are a little bit cropped, show that you have some ankles, or go with wide leg pants that are going to hug and envelop that shoe somewhat so that there's that continuity there. What you don't want is to, again, wear that undefined, shapeless, kind of slim pants that haven't been hemmed and they're just collapsing and bunching up, and that does nothing for you. If you're going to wear shoes that expose more skin, such as pumps or ballerina flats, then I again think it's interesting to have your pants be a little bit cropped, or cuff them if you can do this, but have it still look fairly neat. Because when you show off a little bit of ankle, that bit of skin that's showing is looking more intentional than if you just cut the silhouette off below the ankles. Another thing that you can do with pants that are a little bit cropped is to wear some boots that are going to be hidden a little bit under the pants, and this makes it so that you don't have a little awkward sliver of flesh showing. So our next step is to think about the shoes, and I've already talked about this a little bit because you see, these things all have to dialogue with each other, right? The kind of coat you wear and the kind of pants you wear, they have to make sense together, but then the pants also have to make sense with the shoes. And you could even think of the shoes making sense also with whatever you're wearing on your top half, because sometimes the shape of the shoe can help balance out the top, right? If you have more volume on top, perhaps a chunkier shoe is going to help create some balance. For shoes, I think it is important to pick leather shoes that are made with good quality real leather, because leather is more adaptable, more malleable, whereas if you go with something that's very stiff, and this is usually the case with synthetic leather, it's going to rub your foot. It's going to be very uncomfortable normally. Also, synthetic leather is not breathable. You don't want your feet to get sweaty and then also cold during the winter time. Sneakers are a great option, but here is where a lot of people fall down the trap of thinking that, well, if they have to wear sneakers, then that means that their style is going to take a hit, because they think of sneakers as something pragmatic, something that you wear to go to a gym. But in actuality, a lot of sneakers are made or designed to be worn in your day-to-day. These usually will look a little more sleek and minimalist, or they have that kind of vintage athleisure look to them. Or you could go for something deliberately chunky, but then you have to be very unapologetic about it and find something that does actually feel like a statement. The goal here is to find something that has a point of view and not something that's there just for pragmatism. But again, if you're someone who doesn't like sportiness, your choice of wearing something sporty is always going to feel like a compromise. So if you can go for more of like a leather loafer or something like that, but make sure it's comfortable, that's probably going to make you happier. But I understand that sometimes you have to walk a lot, and so that's not always an option. And if you live somewhere where it snows, then by all means wear shoes that are adequate for that. And that might mean having a pair of shoes that you use to commute to work, for instance, and having something else that you wear at the office so you feel more put together. Now with socks, there's also an opportunity to make a statement with a bold color. Or you could take a cue from menswear and wear socks that are the same color of the pants, or maybe you're wearing black shoes, you could wear black socks, but like dressier socks, not the sporty or very cutesy ones that are often marketed to us women. We can often feel as though we have to wear invisible socks with shoes, but we don't. We can do the same thing men have been doing historically, and it looks polished, and it will keep you warm. Now the next step is to consider how you layer pieces together. Layering is such a great tool for creating visual interest. In fact, a lot of people who struggle with style in the summertime as opposed to winter struggle with summer because summer is when you are not really able to layer as many pieces, right? So it forces people to strip down, and this leaves them feeling as though they have less options to create visual interest. Now, going back to that look I showed you, that sweater underneath is not really behaving really well because the coat is very straight, it's a little more narrow, and that sweater, it's not bulky, but it is slouchy and oversized, and so it's kind of popping out of the garment in a way that's not interesting. So when we're layering pieces together, usually we're wearing the thinnest thing next to our skin, and we're going thicker and thicker as we move outwardly. And that's because we don't want to put something that's bulky under something thinner, or it's going to deform the shape of that. It's going to be awkward, right? So this is just common sense. Layering is not just about staying warm, it's also about creating visual interest, seeing different pieces stacked, having a collar that's popping out of a sweater, or the ribbed neck of a t-shirt, or the hemline underneath popping from out of a sweater. It may seem trivial, but these things make it look like you are dressing with more intention. Last but not least, you want to be thinking about your accessories. I already touched upon socks, but everything you wear, your beanie hat, your scarf, your handbag, all of these things can add so much interest. And think about the quality of the materials as well. Just because it's a scarf doesn't mean you can't also opt to grab something that's made of cashmere and wool instead of just something synthetic. You can always look for things in a secondhand market if you want a good deal on them, okay? And because coats are something that you wear on repeat during the winter time, unless you're someone who has a lot of space in their closet to have multiple coats, most people are going to be wearing the same coats day in, day out. So your accessories are an opportunity to switch things up, make your look a little different from day to day. So do not treat them as an afterthought. These are elements that take your look from looking just pragmatic, from just a reaction to the cold, a way to stay warm, to something that will keep you warm, yes, but there's also some personality there. There's also a point of view, something about you that you're expressing. Notice that I'm not pushing you towards any specific aesthetics. You can always adapt things to how you want things to look, but it's about choosing pieces with intentionality and viewing the winter time not as an obstacle, but as an opportunity, okay? All great artists understand that constraints, that limitations are not something that hold us back. On the contrary, it's a very important way to develop one's creativity, because when everything is on the table, then it's really hard to make choices. But when we have a more narrow scope of things to work with, that is when we can actually put our minds to work.